Hello everybody, Marty the Off-Grid Gecko here. So I broke my axe while I was making the video for cutting down a tree. Broke the handle to be more specific, so I need a new handle. I put these billets up last winter and I've been wanting to do a video on this. I know I've done some stuff, but it's kind of a process that takes me a long time. I work on this a little at a time as I go. And I'm about 2 hours of actual work into this one, and it's actually getting pretty doggone close to where it needs to be. So I'm probably going to be making some good progress on this tonight. Nope, I've got it upside down, that's why it looks so close. So the first thing you need is a billet. Now, when I make billets out of trees, I basically split the tree up into sections. I'll cut off like a 48-inch log, and then I'll split it very carefully. I've done some videos on how to do this. That's very tedious, time-consuming, and difficult work. And then after that, essentially, all you're doing is shaving down a billet. So you take those little what do you call it, the staves from the log, and you can split them down further by putting an axe or a froe on the top and hammering it with a mallet or a log down to break into equal sized portions until you get something down to about the size that you need for a blank. And grain orientation is supposedly important, and it actually is. This is red oak, and I'm going against the grain here. So normally you want the tree rings on an axe handle or a hatchet handle to be running this way, like left and right, where the blade's going to be like this. So they're running in the same plane as this. This is red oak, and I'm doing this one differently because every axe handle that I've carved out of this has split along a medullary ray. Medullary rays run from the center of the tree out, so they're crossing the grains at 90-degree angles. So I'm doing my medullary rays on this one this way, and the grain, the actual tree rings like this, which is kind of backwards from conventional thought, but for this particular wood, this tree, and whatever I've screwed up during the drying process, maybe, I don't know, but for whatever reason it always splits along those little rays, and it never ever seems to split along the grain pattern. So I'm intentionally going against the grain, and we're going to see how this works out. So basically what I do is I'll continue to split these down until they're a nice size. You want to dry them for a really long time. You want to dry them slowly, which is why the end of this is painted green. And this end's painted green as well, because I just slapped some latex paint on there to kind of slow the air coming out from either end, because that's where it'll dry the fastest, and then it'll check up here on the ends if you don't have them protected. I may have to go into more detail on protecting them later. Now the tools that I'm using, so to split and cut this, I basically use this, a hatchet and a log. Sometimes I'll use the axe head that I'm going to be mounting on this to do a lot of that kind of work, just because I believe, axe head, this is your handle, so you need to play a part in this. I have a rasp, which is my primary cutting tool, and I have Off-Grid Gecko pocket knife, which I'll be using today. And I probably should put a sharp on it before I do this, but it doesn't really matter. So what I'm doing is basically I've taken my axe and I've chipped off the general shape here, trying very carefully not to take too much. And then once I get it rough formed to the head, then it's just a matter of taking the head, knowing which side's the top. The larger hole is going to be on top, and lining this up and looking down here and seeing where the little air gaps are and how much more I have to take off. Basically, and some people, you can mark it with like a pencil so you can kind of keep track, but the important thing is when you're rasping to keep running all the way along here, so it can get a little bit thicker as you slide down, but you really want this to be as flat as possible so that when it goes in, you know, you're not taking as much off. And we'll work on trimming down the thicker trunk of it later. I'm just kind of rough forming it now where it's a little flatter. So when I look at it, I see, you know, a convex kind of shape that goes to a flat line. And when you're looking at an edge on, it'll go to a flat line, and then that flat line runs out to the end, just to make sure everything's kind of in the same plane, same playing field. And this might seem like a really tough skill to learn, but it's really not that hard. Just pick up a rasp and start doing it. Also, if you find yourself gouging, then you may just want to change the angle that you're running the rasp, because a lot of times the angle that you're running it at will cause it to gouge out, and you don't want that, obviously, because then you're stripping off more wood than what you want to. Fast and in a hurry is the surest way to screw up. Alright, so that guy's on there just barely. There's going to be some tension, some tight areas, and this is where it gets interesting and fun. So I don't want to do this with the hatchet. I need to find me a block of wood that I can beat on this with. It's a rather small mallet, but for this purpose it should suffice. Now you notice I've not done anything to the rest of the handle yet. I've kind of shaved out a little here with the axe, just chipped it out where I'm going to take out the back here, and then I've chipped out a little down here, but I haven't actually thinned it yet. I want to make sure this thing goes on before I start getting too carried away, because the part's easy, you know. So that guy slipped on. So what I'm looking for now is where it's these little burrs that are forming around the bottom, where it's actually cutting the wood, because that will give me an idea of what needs to be trimmed. The first thing I'm looking at is this little ring of burrs going around here. So anywhere there's a burr, I want to shave that area down a little bit. And again, I'm starting a couple inches back and just kind of working my way up toward the burr and removing just enough material to take the burr off. And I'm going to need a bigger mallet to really drive it home when I'm ready to seed it, but for the moment, it should work just fine. That guy is not wanting to go in there, but I don't know if you can see that. It fits in there, and there's no daylight visible through it, so it's a nice tight fit. Good 3/4 of an inch of the way into this, and while you're doing this, also that technique is going to kind of compress all of this material as well. So we want to get enough of this into the head to have some sticking out, maybe about 1/4 of an inch. Then we'll take the head back off and cut a kerf in this part. We're getting there. Just almost through. The bit's fairly straight, and that was a pretty good bit of whacking. It looks like I just need to take from this side a little bit more, and we'll be good to go. Get this guy back off and do it all over again. Isn't that great? You gonna stay away when the bit falls off? Kitty says, "Don't let it hurt me." Alright, now for the fun part that's really not a whole lot of fun at all. This guy. And I really need to think about getting a new saw, or figuring out how to touch this guy up, because it's starting to get a little dull in the teeth. But hopefully I got enough left. So what we want to do is line this up as best we can down the middle, cut as straight as we can, also down the middle. So I'm just cutting me a little back cut here to get a line, and that didn't produce much of a line. Ooh, scoot back a little bit. very lightly and gently. Start gouging this guy out. I'm using my fingers back here as a kind of a guide. And then we got a line started. Now it's important to run straight down this blade as much as you can. Even though it's important, that doesn't make it easy. So I try to keep everything lined up with my eyeball. And once you've got the cut really started, then you can kind of lay off, but I don't really have a good solid cut in here yet. And you want to be really careful so you don't saw into your hand. That would not be good, or so I'm told. And my line's not perfectly straight here, so let's see if I can remedy that a bit. Once you've got a groove started in this, then you can be a little more aggressive with the cut. But getting that groove started is really the first hardest part, and the next hardest part is keeping this groove straight all the way down the blade. Now, as far as depth, they say you want to go about 2/3 of the axe, so you can tell where this seated on here, where it was almost there, and then I trimmed and scraped everything up. So I'm fairly certain with a bit of exerted effort I can get this on here. Also, when you're taking this down, only use your knife or your rasp to file down the area down here. This part can already make it through. Don't worry about it. Just file down the area that needs to be filed down and just keep working your way down. So if it's a little slimmer at the bottom, not a big worry. If you start taking off too much up here of the meat, then it's just not going to hold worth shit. So, little heads up there. It's actually one of the nicer kerf jobs I've done. Normally, I get about 1/3 of the way down this and I'll start drifting to one side or the other. I started to up here, but then I kind of canted the saw to one side and got her back in line. Yeah, it really doesn't take that long, but while you're sawing, it feels like you're taking forever to get through this. It's very early. It's still dark outside. I'm not even sure I'm awake yet, but I need to cut a wedge, so I'm gonna maybe grab a chunk of wood off this pile. Actually, I've got some shorter ones over here. Yeah, that's pretty. I like that one. Alright, I'll show you how I do this. Well, you don't believe it right now, but there is a freaking wasp right on my damn camera lens. Let's see if I can get a shot of him. I probably can't because he's like right up on there, making love to it. Get out of here. Get out of here. Move. Dude. Okay. He crawled around the underside of the camera. You're probably going to bite me in the neck. Alright, now the key to splitting effectively. This piece is actually splitting really well on its own. Everything's coming out perfectly straight, so that's pretty awesome. But generally speaking, you want to get roughly equal mass on either side of the piece that you're going to split, and then it'll split the best and the straightest and truest and that kind of thing. It's a really uncooperative piece of wood. Break me off a chunk. It was time to wake up. Shush. Alrighty. This may be a little too wet to do this effectively. Smells like pickles. Alright, so we got my little plank. Okay. Get a good, I'm basically just going over the top and planing this. I'm not carving the wedge yet, just to remove all these loose fibers so they're not binding up and hanging up on stuff when I drive it in. So what I'm going to do is carve the wedge on this side, and then I'll cut it about here, and then I'll have a spot where I can drive it in. So you gotta remember it's only going to go into the axe about that far. I think that is too long of a taper, but I like it. We'll roll with that. There we go. Alright. I don't necessarily want to finish this yet, but I do want to get this part of the handle near the top where I can get in there with a rasp once this is secured on. So I'm just basically trimming it out. Just take little chunks out all along the area you want to cut. And throw little wood chips at the kitties. If you want to prevent this kind of crap, you can actually, I probably should have, smooth out the bottom of this ring a little bit before you pop that guy on there. It'll help tremendously with that. We ain't got time for that. We've got places to do and things to be. So now what I'm going to do is pop my wedge in. Now when you're working with PVA glue, time is of the essence, especially when you're welding two parts together like this, because once you get it in there and it starts to seat, this is going to want to set up real quick. So I'm just going to be sloppy with it. Get it going. Boom, boom, boom. Boom, boom, boom. Lots of excess. I'm not even going to worry about smearing it around too much, except down here at the bottom. Just make sure we got good contact on all surfaces. Sides are irrelevant. Don't worry about excess. It'll squish out of the axe. Trust me. So just get that squeezed on there, off your finger, into here, and then we'll just start tapping her in. Neat. And block of wood or something. Ooh. Turn that on there. Try that guy in there. The best that we can do it. I like to give a few taps like this. Just to really drive it home. And yeah, I believe that'll do. Set that sucker off to the side and let it set up all day while I'm in town doing my in-town run. Anyways, that's axe construction basics. The only real change that I'm going to make to this at this point is, number one, I'm going to take it out and abuse it a little bit, make sure it's going to hold this way before I try and put a pretty on it. But I will probably round off some of these edges and you know, get it battle ready. I'll trim this. I won't take it completely off, but I'll go ahead and trim this where it's just not in the way. It's not good for limbing at this point because you're going to be knocking against the wedge every time you swing. So small swings, small trees, little light work for it for now, and then once everything fully sets up and cures, then I'll go ahead and trim this off and drive my cross wedge in, and then we'll go from there for the rest of it. But yeah, it's basically how you carve an axe handle and a wedge from the woods. Thank you for watching. This is Soft Gray Gecko signing out. Don't forget to subscribe, and if you want to, tell your friends about the videos so they can watch them too. If you find this information helpful or whatever, go ahead and leave me a comment, send me an email, find my website, offgraygecko.com. You can get my email address from there. Send me a message. I want to hear from you. Thanks. Bye.